What's going on, YouTube Metal Complex here, and today I am very excited to say that I have finally figured out what I'm going to do with Sundays. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you'll know that, once my quest for the perfect folding knife series ended, I just said I was going to do random stuff, whatever I thought might be entertaining for Sundays, and I didn't know how long that would go on, where I would just kind of post whatever, and I had pre-recorded a battle, which you guys will also get today. I don't know if I've already uploaded it or if I'll upload it after this, but in any case, you'll get two uploads today. But from now on, Sundays are going to be filled with my new series called The Knife Guy. And what it is actually is it's me recounting stories as I became the knife guy in my own social world. And the reason I think you guys might find that entertaining because each one of you individually is the knife guy in your own social world. Whether it be at work or wherever, your friends who may not understand the hobby or may not completely understand your hobby, they know you as the knife guy. And, a few of them, they're just not interested at all. They're still your buddies, they're still your family members, whoever. But they're like, I'm not interested. You're a weird guy who likes knives. But you guys know as well as I do, eventually you get at least one of your buddies, at least one of your family members who's interested. But they're amateurs because everybody's got to start somewhere, right? So the foundation of these stories is kind of the awkward situations you get in dealing with people who don't understand, all of the complexities of folding knives, the do's and don'ts, the things that we might consider obvious, other people don't consider obvious, and it kind of the end result is you get into some weird situations, and I've actually got a ton of stories in this department. So what this is going to be basically me picking up knives and playing with them while I recount past experiences with people. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk. So a lot of you know that I used to work at a dealership. And when I started there, much like most people who start a new job, you don't know anybody. And, new guys at any job, if you've been there for a while, a new guy can either be really cool or a super weirdo. And a lot of times, with new guys at work, you get guys who overcompensate for not knowing how to interact in a new social space. They overcompensate by the most common theme is the one-upper. We always used to joke about new guys at the dealership being a one-upper. Anything that you talk about with your work peers, he's sitting in a corner and he's got a story about something he did that was similar but better in some way, and there's nothing more obnoxious than that. I mean, to those of you not aware, when you do that, you instantly make people not like you. This story is not about that, but me, being aware of this, the last thing I wanted to do was isolate myself as a weirdo or a one-up or anything like that. And so I tried not to do that. Now, I was already well into knives at this point. And if you're a knife guy, a lot of times some of you can keep that to yourselves, but for whatever reason, I will find opportunities to talk about knives with people who I'm pretty sure have zero interest in it, and it's like I can't help it. I'm already like way into it, way too fast. And some people take to it, or maybe they trust me as a person. They think it depends on what other vibes you give off as a person as far as whether or not people are okay with talking with you about it. But in any case, that's another story in and of itself. But my coworkers actually ended up accepting me for being the knife guy, and after a while it became not weird. It definitely was a little bit weird during the first 6 months at the dealership, and I could tell people were like, what the heck is going? What is this guy? He likes folding knives. Like, ugh, geez, And you guys will be familiar with that feeling of being treated like that. Like you're a weirdo if you bring that up in your social life. But anyways, it became normal, and it got to a point where my coworkers and my bosses, a lot of my bosses were like, "What are you carrying today? What do you got in your pocket?" And they would always want to see, and it was cool. as I kind of grew to accept those guys at the dealership as a second family, it was cool to see them accept that part of me. One of my bosses, I had many bosses. One of my bosses eventually got to a point where he said, "All right, I want a knife. Help me out. I want a knife." And I said, "Okay," and I'm kind of laughing. And I said, "Well, how much money do you want to spend? Like, do you want like a good, like a $150, $200 knife or what?" And he said, No. I don't want to spend more than $50. And I said, "Okay." And I'm realizing now I probably should have got this knife out to demonstrate, but I ended up recommending an Ontario Rat 1 in D2 steel. And he said, "Why this one?" And he didn't like how it looked. And I said, "Listen, D2 steel is amazing for this price range. You guys have heard me and everybody else on the internet talk about this. D2 steel is amazing for this price range. It's going to hold an edge like forever. And it's super tough. It's it's an amazing steel. They used it in World War II. Now, to other knife people, me saying that sounds like, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's tough. It's edge retentive. We understand the parameters that surround a statement like that, the limitations of what that means. To somebody who doesn't know that, and I forget this, and a lot of us forget this as knife people, we forget that these things don't translate perfectly to people who aren't a part of this world, right? So what my boss heard was, the blade on this knife is indestructible and can cut anything. And I didn't realize that at the time. We waited for the knife to come in, and it came in, and of course, watching somebody try and deploy a thumb stud opener when they don't know, oh, that's painful. He was doing this. How do you open it? You open it like this. And we're like, there's a thumb stud right there. Just use the thumb stud. But it doesn't, this is off topic, but it doesn't translate correctly. And so, anyways, he's trying to figure out how to use the thumb stud, and I'm showing him. I'm like, now you got to build up some force back here. And then once you feel the resistance, push a little harder and then let it come out and it'll flip up. So eventually he kind of figured it out. And so I'm showing him, look how nice the edge is. This is called a flat grind. It's really good for blah, 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 cutting all this stuff. So I have to go to the bathroom. So I leave what we call the tower. I leave the tower and I come back and he says, "Hey, this knife is dull." And I was like, "What? We just cut paper with it." I was like, "No, it's not dull." And he was like, "It won't even cut paper now." And so I take the knife and I start to draw it across. I think I was using just a sticky note like this. And sure enough, it was dull. And I was like, "What the heck?" Well, I said, "What?" He was like, "Well, I tried to cut this." So this is what it hit me all at once. What he pulled out was where we a lot of times, like where we kept spare keys for whatever reason, vehicles that needed to go into, I guess, that were on loan, or the spare key of a vehicle is on loan or something that had to go in the shop for whatever reason, it wasn't on the lot. There was a specific key ring that was held together by a steel cable. And we had a bunch of these steel cables for different reasons. It was a small, coiled up steel cable that acted like a ring loop or a key loop. He decided, I'm going to test this D2 steel blade. And I mean, I know, like, this sounds so stupid to me and to you guys and everybody, but I can't really blame him because I didn't give him the right information. So he's sitting at his desk and apparently he pulls that loop up to the blade like this, and he tries to just draw the blade across that loop thinking that it's just going to split it apart. And of course, it immediately dulls it, and he doesn't just do it once. Apparently, he did it like 40 times. And he was like, "I tried as hard as I could to cut. It won't even cut this steel cable." And I was like, "Dude, that's not what you should use a knife for. You don't." And he was like, "Well, what kind of knife is this, And he was like, "Well, what's different about this?" And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I set the expectations of this knife so high and didn't explain. I didn't even take the time to explain. He has no concept of what you should or shouldn't use a knife for, which is pretty much the same for anybody that's not a part of the knife world. To most people, knives are just blades that you can use for anything. And some people, even in the knife world, do use their knives for that. But I realized it was 100% my fault. I didn't explain, what I meant by edge retentive or super tough. I didn't explain the natural, like, of course, D2 is a better steel than a junk gas station knife. But in terms of what he was used to using a knife for, or what he expected of any knife, I guess, there was no difference. It became a useless piece of steel at that point. And so that became this long joke, like, don't give him a knife. Anthony was his name. I said, don't give Anthony a knife. He will immediately try to cut a steel cable or a can or a car door, or something like that, because that's what he does with knives. He has to do that. So I guess the moral of this story is like, we all poke fun. I remember on Blade Forums, this was a topic, and actually, I may have actually started a discussion on Blade Forums about this one time. It's, about like, stuff that people do with knives that makes you upset. And it's actually the reason that I oftentimes will carry a backup knife in my rear right pocket, is because non-knife people will use pocket knives for anything. They'll pry on stuff, they don't care. They have no concept of right and wrong with a folding knife, And the rest of us who have been, a part of this world for a long time and have had knives that we use and had knives that we baby, knives that we consider more or less premium, we have reservations. A lot of us have reservations on what you can and can't do with a pocket knife, but there are certainly limitations. Whether or not you're a person who will use your knife for just about anything, there are just certain things that you can't do with a knife that should not be expected, to do, like cutting a steel cable. And so this discussion group this discussion on Blade Forums was just like, stuff that people try to do with knives that just makes you cringe. And a lot of the discussion that got brought up was like, well, it's kind of, if there's a true knife guy involved, it's kind of their fault for not informing the person beforehand, like, don't expect this of your pocket knife. So I don't know, that was a funny situation to me, and what I learned from it is that I have to be more responsible. I want to get people into knives. I want people, I love the kind of getting somebody who's just a regular person who just is aware of pocket knives basically, but has an interest in knives. I love teaching them about the world of premium pocket knives. And it's the reason that I started this channel. Honestly, is just because I can't stop talking about it. And I love introducing knives to people, but I need to do a really good job of explaining thoroughly of what you can or can't expect of a pocket knife. No matter how nice a knife is, they have their limitations. Knives should be used to cut things. They should be used to cut things that are not as hard as the blade. And that was essentially what I explained to Anthony too late, was that steel cable is incredibly hard, and that blade is hard too. You drag that blade across anything that's, nearly as hard or harder than that steel, then it's going to go dull incredibly fast. It doesn't matter what type of steel it is. People always talk about, I think people that get ahead of themselves always talk about jamming blades into the hood of a car. Yeah, but you could jam a piece of rebar into the hood of a car, or pretty much any reasonably thick piece of steel that's got a point on it. That doesn't mean much, but is it going to dull up your edge? Probably. Maybe 3V would survive a couple of runs through a car hood, but it's still not a practical application for a knife, and it's definitely not something that you should expect of your pocket knife, but I need to do a better job explaining that to people, especially when I have the opportunity in person, because that's an easy way to turn somebody off to knives altogether. Is in Anthony's case, hey, this thing is so amazing, it's amazing, like, look, it can do all these things, and so he gets the wrong idea and tries to do something with it, and it doesn't work at all, and then he's like, well, I'm never going to spend money on pocket knives ever again. And then now you have this opposing force in your world where you're like, and he would joke, he was joking, but he would be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He'll say that these knives can do all these amazing things, and they can't. I tried to cut the steel cable and it wouldn't. And he was joking because he knew it'd get me fired up, and we'd kind of go back and forth. But some people would react that way and saying that, you know, it's never, you never need to spend more than X amount, you know, on a pocket knife and create this, basically create an opposition that's born out of misinformation. And so I think, you know, it's our responsibility as people, you know, in this knife world to kind of explain to newcomers, because we were all new once. Take the time to explain to them, you know, what should be expected of your pocket knife, what it can and can't do, and to be honest about pocket knives that cost an enormous amount of money that you're not necessarily getting an enormous amount back from. Now, I love Hinderer knives, but this is a $625 knife. Is that something that I would recommend to somebody and try to explain to them how it's, you know, 500 and some odd dollars better than whatever other knife they may have been looking at the starting point of premium knives? No, that's not a good idea, because you're not going to be able to explain it. You know, it's like what I talked about in my point of diminishing returns video. But anyways, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for this episode today. I've got enough written down to do at least 10 episodes of this. Maybe you guys will find it interesting. Maybe you won't. But it gives me another opportunity to play with knives on camera and talk about knives. Some of these stories are funny and some of them are not. But I imagine you guys will find most of them at least fairly interesting. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel, because there is definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.